Hi there, Randi Green here, another podcast where I will contemplate upon some of the issues that we are struggling with today, those of us who are doing the transition. In the previous podcast, that kind of was the historical foundation for the work that we are doing now, the division of our universe. In 45 minutes, laid out the universal history, gives us some key players in the next level of information that I want to go into. There are so many things that we need to take into consideration. In a way, it is mind-blowing, and there are too many layers in whatever we need to know, and it feels a little bit too overwhelming to get in what we could say, have an overview of all of these different features that are being played out. But we can say that the technocratic races, the 511 pillar, that are highly oriented towards militaristic and technology-infused sciences, let me call it that way, because I want to put all of these three together, military, scientific, as well as technological. And here I want to refer to, I found the full speech of Eisenhower as he said farewell to the White House from 1955. It's part of the human history, where there are also a 4-hour-long podcast series from BBC that talks about the century of self. And I highly recommend you watch these two, because there we have the four main players that are operating inside our base program. Consumerism, technology, militaristic endeavors, let's call it that, science, and technology. So we're talking about consumerism, or marketing, quote unquote, the way of selling things, creating desires, but at the same time also keeping people in the loop of the need of consumption, not just producing what we need, but actually overproducing and over-creating products and services more than what we actually need to keep the wheels going for what we call the money machine. So, and then we have the military-industrial complex machine, and we have the technology machine, and we have the scientific elite, and we have what we call the political elite, if we want to call it that one. So we are having this showing of the 5 domains, but in a very downsized manner, as in consumerism is how to transform matter into different features, not transforming it to the highest purity rate, but transforming it into more desire, more need, more materialism. We, at the same time, creating false needs that we don't really, how many iPhones do you need, right? So just to take that as an example, how many coffee machines do you need? How many kitchen utensils do you need? Just put that in the mix. Or how many cars do you need? Another angle of that one. So that's how we have been tricked into, instead of doing what we call the natural laws of energy, how to transform the whole universe to undo the effects of the timeline event, we have now been pushed into what we call consumerism, where we transform through eating more than we need, producing more than we need, using our natural resources in ways that creates distortion, aka pollution. So in that way, we have the physical distortion manifested as part of our outer domains that are now bending the resources to their needs, and the outer system configuration is beginning to not being able to recalibrate anymore and reset, so it continue to have the needs that are foundational for our holographic units and their transformational processes to undo the effect of the timeline event, because the outer domain were recalibrated for that purpose as part of what I call the restoration programs after the timeline event. So in that way, we are destroying our own world since we were hijacked 15,000 years ago, where the world changed one more time, came out of the last ice age and into the Holocene as we know of it, where the sun was recalibrated to hold what we call the different regressed races that are here producing what they need to continue their own existence using our resources. And I'm talking all resources here, including exploiting other life forms. So we are in that understanding, and we have been tailored into following the same ideas to be the right ideas. So humanity is now supporting these groups by their everyday living and the everyday way that we are acting in the world as we know of it. So that's the first step of the journey, and that's what most religions kind of covered as in, I said covered, not coveted, but covered. We could say the coveted too, but the understanding of how do we get out of materialism? First step, how do we get out of the desire wheel? Right? So that's part of that one. The next one is where we go in and say, okay, then we have all the gadgets, whatever form they are. We can call it the military industrial complex. We call it the war machine. We call it whatever it is. It is this segregation dynamics. It's where instead of working as teams, we are working in groups against each other. So that's what that one is oriented towards. Then we can say we have the scientific elite where we are working with what we could say the kind of competition that are now also funded by different types of paradigms within where you can only get funds if you work within specific paradigm. That's a control system of the freedom of thought that science normally are used to have. And I'm pointing you in that direction because we are having dynamics that is shown in the Century of Self and going into kind of reaching its peak in Eisenhower's peak, where he warns us against the military industrial complex. He warns us against a spiritual elite, a scientific elite, and he warns us against a technocratic elite that are there to demolish democracy as we know of it, our spiritual freedom and our freedom to work as groups within a peaceful environment. Let me put it that way. That's a little bit over-interpreting what Eisenhower said, but I'm just putting that one in. You should listen to the 16 minutes and not just the 3-minute snips. Listen through the entire speech. You will see he warns us on 3 specific levels. Military-industrial complex, that's the one that's always been shown out there. But he also warns us against the scientific elite, and he also warns us against the demolishing of the democratic rights that we have as free people on this planet, so to speak. So that's why is that more focused on? That's even more important. Yes, we had the military-industrial complex that were very important in the 50s and the 60s. But we also had the rising of the scientific elite, as well as the technocratic elite. These are also very important to pay attention to because these are some of the things that we are, what we could say, in the mix of understanding now that the scientific elite can go in and actually change the minds of governmental forces, as we have seen. He warns us about that too. How science can go in and overrule the democratic processes. Haven't we just seen that? As well as when we go in technology, which is the next step when we talk about the implementation of AI, how that is overruling science communities. Everything is now nesting and resting upon AI. It's been ruled out. And those of you with eyes to see with and ears to hear with, and remember what happened in the previous universal cycles, you will see that's the rollout. That's the one that we are to be observant of. We have had a lot of good possibilities in the last many years to undo this one, and we have still not learned the lesson. And I, of course, attribute it to the fact that 10 of the lineages that came from the previous universal cycles, they decided to get recalibrated. So they forgot the lessons, but they had to do so because the original or the higher order energy system architecture were already so damaged due to the previous universal cycles that the codes they had to rebuild their vessels inside these universal cycles, they were not to the best of their quality. So their learning lesson was, of course, this very long 1-7 pillar where you learn everything from scratch, 2-8 pillar where you learn to work with others from scratch under the rules of engagement, 3-9 pillar where you learn to work with the natural laws of energy, again from scratch, the 4-10 pillar where you learn about governance, again from scratch, and 5-11 where you then get allowed to work with the technology that you had access to in the previous universal cycles, but now you have the full understanding of how to work with it so it doesn't create a war, so it doesn't create cube takeover, artificial augmented type of reality fields that are running in ways that are dissimilar to what the ancient ones built into their configuration this time around. This time around, it nests upon principles and rules and consciousness potentials that are to work as teams and work together to progress, contrary to previous universal cycles where the segregation and the invasion and conquering of space were at the top of our evolutionary list. So you can kind of see we reverted back to the previous universal cycles and their structures due to the 511 pillar that then began after they had created the less progressive universal structure, were put under quarantine, at some point kind of discovered, doesn't work. Okay, cool. We now begin to take what's not ours. We want the original holographic energy structure because at least then we will have access to the old type of technologies. And by that, we might take over the new universal structures and make it in the image that we wanted, in our own image. So with that, we are then in that struggle where the ones that decided one thing and they decided another thing, and we can always discuss what is the right way or the wrong way. But what we are seeing is that the technocratic races under the 511 pillar, they are, and the previous universal cycles, they have worked their way through this universal matrix and have conquered and taken over using the old methods. And we are now in what we call the outer domain, where we are discovering and reliving what we clearly did not learn in the previous universal cycle. So we have to do it all over again. Make the choice again to continue our progression journey via consciousness, to transfigure and transform the holographic units to their highest potentiality, to their highest viability rate, using our consciousness potentials. And in these universal cycles, we do it with kindness. We do it with compassion. And sorry, I'm not sounding very compassionate here, am I? But it's also the understanding of discernment. When we talk about compassion, compassion is more than what we think it is. It's not just to be kind and mellow and humble. That's part of it, especially for the ones that kind of got reseeded after the time of Atlantis, where they still had not learned the lessons of the previous universal cycles. They came under new programs where they were to unfold, especially compassion. Many of the reseeding races of the fourth cycle, they were to learn the lesson of compassion. That's why in many religious systems, that is the key node: compassion, forgiveness, self and others, self-nurturing, self-healing, self-care. Not for service to self, but if you are kind to yourself, take care of yourself, nurture yourself, and protect the physical form you have in a manner that makes it produce the highest progression rate, the highest purity, and the highest standards. Then you can exemplify that for others, and with that become the first of many. So that's why we were pushed back. And when we had the takeover in 15,000 years ago, well, in that manner, we could say it was easy because at that time, the civilizations that we had on our planet were focused on learning from scratch again the fourth cycle dynamics of working as teams. And we were to work through the heart field of compassion. And since we are all oriented towards that, and at that time, many had unfortunately demolished their radiation field, that means connected to the inner domain, and by that had lost the ability for the galactic consciousness potentials, and by that had lost the ability to work holographic energetic, and now only were focused on the heart field. Well, it was an easy takeover, right? It was like going in and talking to the sweetness and the kindness of people that were now alluded and talked about as children. Because technically many were already in what we call a relearning process from the very get-go when they spilled over into these universal structures. Hence, the councils and the overseeing and the protection and the protectorates that were to ensure that they would then do their processes within different constructions and reality fields that were overseen by people of the 612 pillar that understood kindness, that had re-engineered themselves to only exceed and excel within kindness, within the advancement of understanding, that we are here to assist, mentor, facilitate the growth potentials of all. So that's how I would look when we talk about what is the higher order sciences within the progression worlds. That is to develop and progress for the highest potential outcome, for the highest progression rate for all, so that we all as a joint group or lineages or civilizations can move on. But with that, we need discernment as well, because technology can be used as well. And there is technology in the progressive worlds. It's just imbued with consciousness. It's tied to who and what we are. So in that manner, we could say that once the conglomerates within the 511 pillar decided to team up together and create alliances and began the invasion strategies, it was easy peasy. Take out the technology, which is their forte, override it with specific code systems, put in dark light coding, and take over the cubes, and then you have access to the civilizations, the reality field, and then to the energy systems of the ones that lives there. So that's the invasion strategy that they unfolded within the Pleiadian system as the first one, and by that got access to the hubs that the Pleiadians were under the control of. They were, the Pleiadians of that group at the old days, were the foundational, what we call six-dimensional hub or gate system into this reality field. Either way, so when we are in this discussion, when we talk about what, for those of us who are in the base program, what is it that we need to learn? What is it that we need to do inside the base program? What is it that is important for us as we move into the transitional processes where we again recall who and what we are, where we recall what we're supposed to do here, and where we begin to clear out our distortion that has been circulating both collectively in our reality field as part of the old programs, as part of the reseeding of the fourth cycle civilizations, of which many of you know as the original high cultures that again lost their potentiality as they discovered that the ones that had teamed up with actually were not there really to help them in their continued processes. And that's another part of history that will also surface within different understandings of human history and what is now taking place. So we are in this weird mud of so many levels of information that we are being overloaded with information, deliberately done so to create more distortion. And with that, our key word is our own personal history. Because if we constantly look into the collective history, we will get so bombarded with so many levels of information that it becomes impossible for us to keep what we could say the discernment intact between what is mine and what is others, and what is reality field, and what is systemic, and what is galactic, and what is universal, that's the core domain, and where do I go with all this knowledge? How do I do my progression journey in all of that information? What is important? What do I focus on? And principle 3 plays in there. What you give energy, you amplify. What you look at, you give energy and you amplify it. So what are you to look at? What are you to know so you know when not to look at it? What are you to know so you can turn the other cheek? And all of these very, very difficult dynamics. And again, I will explain that in the transition sciences as well as in the template science courses. So I've done my class material for it where you get it in detail, explained in detail, explain this is how the rules work, this is how the principles work, this is how the natural laws of energy works, this is how you can also do the beginning of the reconfiguration material. But we are having a much more dire thing that is important for us to focus on, and that's the change of the sun. And that's why I'm touching ground with all this. So you have all of the muddy waters of everything that draws your attention, so that you are not really seeing what is most important, and that is the transition of the sun. Because the transition of the sun is happening because our reality field configuration is resetting. Why is it resetting? Well, first and foremost, there are the laws of the cycles that the ancient ones built into it. But there's also this kind of when we reach, quote unquote, the end cycle, that is where the viability rate is so low that the default mechanisms kick in. And that is what we could say the most two important things in our transition work is, one, the sun is shifting again. So that means that we need to be on top of that one. In our inner work, that's connected to the proton levels in our physical form. It's connected to the vibrational field of our heart field. And it's connected to what we call the Schumann resonance. And it connects to the magnetic field. And it's connected to our planet in itself and our entire solar system, which we are connected to via our holographic energy architecture. So the hollow architecture. So we are in this, that we are being infused with energies from within. At the same time, we are having parallel systems that are infusing the inner domain level so that the core level can be upgraded to the original configuration and the inner domains are being reconfigured as well. We had the huge battle about the galactic core between 2018 and 2022, which is now being shifted into what we call a 6-dimensional core configuration that is also affecting our mental field as well as that used to be part of the inner domain consciousness potentials, that configuration, the radiation holographic units, or your light body, if you like. So that's being affected as well. And at the same time, we're having the forces that are running around our planet, trying to turn it, whatever's left of it, to preserve whatever's left of the viability rate, turning it into a technocratic society run by AI to preserve the energies. And with that, of course, making some pretty difficult decisions regarding what is then the right solution for the amount of persons that are on the surface. So we are having the surface dynamics that are playing out around us. We are having the middle domain dynamics connect to the sun. We are having the inner domain connect to the galactic core. So you see, we are being targeted on all levels of our existence. The mental field, the emotional field, the biofield. So it's no longer just about the spiritual journey or the higher order sciences and the progression sciences and how to evolve and progress as a conscious being using your heart and your compassion and what we call the work on the timelines to undo the distortion fields, to clear up your karma so that you can free yourself from the different timelines you're connected to and have consciousness potentials inserted to which you didn't clear it out and are now there locked in as anchor points to past lives, past timelines, past circumstances where you didn't complete your progression journey, by that created distortion so that you got segregated from it and by that cannot connect to it. So that's the inner journey you have to do in your inner work to reconnect, clear out so you can disassemble or disconnect from these timelines. And then we have the recalibration of the mental field, the mind field that goes into the radiation field to relearn things that were lost during the timeline event, that were taken over by technologies already back then within the different programs, and later on recalibrated and again taken over, overridden by the hijacking races, and completely transferred into a scientific level, science level, technology levels, and understandings of reality that are dissimilar to the original project of the progressive races, where the science is how is science to be learned, what is science actually. So that's a whole other level. And then we have the whole physical transfiguration process that will be affected by the sun, as well as the holographic network of our planet that is being affected by both the galactic levels and the systemic levels and the planetary levels, altering the magnetic field altogether so that the protons, electrons, and neutrons will begin to operate in a different way, which leads to the altering of the quantum field so that the neutron field will then be connected to the new types of matrices of the parallel systems that are under the 511 pillar, allowing for a larger infusion of AI technology-driven interpersonal, communicative, DNA link-up new forms of TGs. So we are in this vast, challenged environment where we are to focus on what is the right thing to do. What does the transition mean for me? And what does it mean to transform into a density one? And as I said in the previous podcast, that's where I'm working my way to. And we will look into that in the next podcast. Thank you.